ஒரு சுவாமி
ஒரு நிமிஷம் மேடம். ஸ்டார்ட்
2 minutes வந்து ஸ்லோகம் சொல்லிட்டமா தேசிகனோட.
நீங்களா ஸ்ரீலதாவா?
அடியன் சொல்லிட்டமா.
இல்ல மிஸ் தேவிக்கு நீங்களே ஆரம்பிங்கோ.
நான் ஒரு பிரேயர் இல்ல ஒரு பிரேயர் ஒருத்தர் வச்சு அரேஞ்ச் பண்ணிருக்கேன். she will now sing.
அரேஞ்ச் பண்ணிருக்கேளா சார்? நான் வந்து ரெண்டு டைம் அந்த ஸ்ரீமான் வெங்கடநாதாரிய தான் சொல்லலாம்னு இருந்தேன். ஓகே
பரவாயில்லை, அத சொன்னா தப்பு இல்லையே, சொல்லுங்க. அதுக்கு அப்புறம் பிரேயரையும் சொல்றேன். சொல்லுங்க ரெண்டு லைன்.
அத மட்டும் தான் சொல்ல போறேன்.
ஓகே.
ஸ்ரீமான் வெங்கடநாதாரிய கவிதார்க்கிக கேசரி வேதாந்தாச்சார்ய வர்யோ மே சந்நிதத்தாம் சதா கிருதி நானிலமும் தான் மறைகள் தாம் வாழ மாநகரின் மாறன் மறை வாழ ஞானியர்கள் சென்னி அணிசே தூப்புல் வேதாந்த தேசிகனே இன்னும் ஒரு நூற்றாண்டிரும்.
Now prayer by கவிதா விஜயராகவன். கவிதா மேடம் ப்ளீஸ்.
எல்லாருக்கும் நமஸ்காரம் சார். ரொம்ப சந்தோஷம் இதுல ஒரு பார்ட்ல நானும் இன்னைக்கு இருக்கிறது இல்ல. ஒரு சின்னதா தெரிஞ்சது பெருமாளோடது பாடுறேன். ஒரு சின்ன கிருதி. ஸ்ரீமன்னாராயண.
வீடியோ போட முடியுமா? போடுங்க.
வீடியோவா? எஸ். வீடியோ ஆனா நான் கார்ல உட்கார்ந்துட்டு இருக்கேன், அதனால வீடியோ may not be visible.
But your voice is very sweet, don't worry. போடுங்க.
Thank you sir. ட்ரை பண்றேன், பட் எவ்வளவு தூரம் இருக்கும்னு தெரியல. I'm not sure of it. ஸ்ரீமன்னாராயண 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 ஸ்ரீமன்னாராயணனே ஸ்ரீபாதமே சரணம். ஸ்ரீமன்னாராயண ஸ்ரீமன்னாராயண ஸ்ரீமன்னாராயணனே ஸ்ரீபாதமே சரணம். கமலா சகி முக கமல கமலஹித கமல பிரியா கமலேக்ஷண கமலாசனஹித கமல கமல பிரியா கமல பிரியா கமலேக்ஷண கமலாசனஹித கருட கமன ஸ்ரீ கமலநாபனே பத கமலமே சரணம். ஸ்ரீமன்னாராயண ஸ்ரீமன்னாராயண ஸ்ரீமன்னாராயணனே ஸ்ரீபாதமே சரணம். परमयोगी जन मार्गधेय श्री परम पुरुष परात्परा परमयोगी जन मार्गधेय श्री परम पुरुष परात्परा परमात्मा परमानुरूप श्री तिरुवेंकटगिरि देवा परमात्मा परमानुरूप श्री तिरुवेंकटगिरि देवा चरणं. श्रीमन्नारायण श्रीमन्नारायण श्रीमन्नारायणने श्रीपादमे चरणं. श्रीमन्नारायण श्रीमन्नारायण श्रीमन्नारायणने श्रीपादमे चरणं. चरणं चरणं நமஸ்காரம்.
ரொம்ப நல்லா இருக்கு. Now,
Thank you, sir.
yes, ma'am. Now the responsibility of giving the welcome address has fallen on me, and I welcome you all to this lecture by the eminent Sri Vaishnava scholar Srilata Raman, who is in University of Toronto, and she is going to speak on Sri Chatcharitra Raksha by Vedanta Desika. You know, Vedanta Desika is, as his prime Sishya Uttama Swamigal says, Yasya Bhatrapade Mase Shravani Janma Visrudam Tena Venkada Nadena Na Guru Na Devu Samaha. No God is equal to him, no Acharya is equal to him. That is Vedanta Desika. He has blessed us with many rakshas like Vedanta Sangraha Raksha, Panjaratra Raksha, Nikshepa Raksha, Sri Sat Charitra Raksha, which our madam is going to talk. It tells about the daily ritual, particularly wearing Urdhva Pundaram and Dwadasa Urdhva Pundaram and Bhagavat Aradhana Kramam and all this. And I know a brief about Srilata madam, and then Mr. Raghavan will take up on, he will give his introduction to the subject. Then Srilata madam will come talk. Srilata Raman is an associate professor of Hinduism at the University of Toronto. Of course, she is from Madurai only. She did her studies in Indology at Oxford University and at the University of Tübingen, Germany. She is the author of 2 monographs, Self-Surrender, that is Prabhati to God in Sri Vaishnavism, and the Transformation of Tamil Religion, Ramalinga Swamigal and Modern Dravidian Sainthood. She has not left any subject, I think. Everything she has touched. She has co-published 3 edited volumes on religious authority of South Asia, Saivism and the Tantric tradition, and Hindu and Buddhist rituals in South Asia, and published more than 20 articles on Tamil religion, including Sri Vaishnava and Tamil Saiva Siddhanta. The focus on her research is the intellectual history in both Tamil and Sanskrit of Tamil religion as well as modern Tamil literature. I now welcome Dr. Sri V.K.S. and Raghavan, our Guru, to talk, to give his introductory comments. Yes, Raghavan sir.
My humble respects to all elders and my pranams to the preceptors of Sri Vaishnavism, especially Vishittadvaita. I am very much delighted to speak a few words on this occasion, that is on a lecture on Sri Satcharitra Raksha by Dr. Srilata Raman. Vedanta Desika is more popular as Sri Venkatanatha in his writings. Generally, his real name is Venkatanatha, but he is very popular in the world as Sri Desika or Sri Vedanta Desika. His granthas are said to be more than 100. In some manuscripts I came across that his works are about 108. Anyhow, among his important monographs, there are quite a few, especially the Sanskrit works are very much popular. He has written commentaries on so many texts of Purvacharyas, even in the list of Raksha Granthas, which Sri T.K. Parsardi just mentioned now. There are 5 Raksha Granthas. Of course, Uttamur Swami has published the title Raksha Granthas, which contains only 4 Raksha Granthas, because he has left the Ragasya Raksha Grantha to be edited by his close and ardent disciple Srivatsankacharya, So Rahasya Raksha Grantha is the fifth one, we can say. First, Gitartha Sangraha Raksha. Second one, Sri Sacharita Raksha. The third one, Pancharatara Raksha. Fourth one, Nikshepa Raksha. And fifth one, Rahasya Raksha. Rahasya Raksha is separate because it is a major commentary on Stotra Ratna and Chatusloki of Alavandar as well as Gadyatraya of Sri Ramanuja. So in Rahasya Raksha, that is the commentary, there are 5 sections. Chatusloki Bhashya, Stotra Ratna Bhashya, and Sri Saranagati Gadya Bhashya, Sri Sriranga Gadya Bhashya, and Sri Vaikunta Gadya Bhashya. Of course, Sri Saranagati Gadya is said to be Prutu Gadya. The other 2 Gadyas are said to be Mita Gadya. Now let me refer to only one Gitartha Sangraha Raksha for making just a reference to Desika's Raksha Granthas. Gitartha Sangraha, containing 32 Sanskrit verses, has been composed by Yamunacharya or Alavandar. That Gitartha Sangraha has been commented on by Sri Vedanta Desika in his Gitartha Sangraha Raksha. The first verse of Yamunacharya's Gitartha Sangraha is as follows. Swadharma Jnana Vairagya Sadhya Bhaktyeka Gocharaha Narayana Parambrahma Gita Sastre Samiritaha. Its Tamil rendering by Sri Vedanta Desika in his Gitartha Sangraha Prabandha is Karumamum Jnanamum Kondalum Kadalukor Ilakendru Arumare Yuchiyul Adari Todum Arum Biramam Tirumagalodu Varum Tirumal Endrutan Uraitan Dharma Muhanda Dhananjayanuka Avan Sarathiye. Of course, Gitartha Sangraha Raksha or Gitartha Sangraha has to be studied under an authentic preceptor who follows the tradition, and it should be studied as a Kalakshepa Grantha, not like reading any novel or such and such. So I just would like to refer to Vairagya Panchaka of Vedanta Desika. So Vairagya Panchaka is said to be a very, very small Stotra Grantha. Of course, it is said as referred to in the Stotra Granthas among the Stotras, but it has the main instruction that we should have Vairagya towards the worldly objects. Vedanta Desika stands as a unique example of Vairagya that is illustrated in his Vairagya Panchaka. The law, then the verse 6 found as the conclusion verse of this Vairagya Panchaka is Nasti Pitrajitam Kinchit Namaya Kinchidarjitam Asti Me Hasti Shailagre Vastu Paitamaham Dhanam. I don't have any paternal prosperity or Pitrajitam. I have not earned anything on my own. Namaya Kinchidarjitam. But there is already the great treasure on the hill of Elephant Rock, that is Astigiri. Asti me hasti shailagre vastu paitamaham dhanam. Swami Desika, Nirmanta Mahadesika refers to Lord Varadaraja as Paitamaham Dhanam, the great wealth or prosperity restored by Brahma, the creator. So, whichever is the belonging of one's grandfather, that naturally comes to the grandson. There is no necessity of any will, etc. for that. as a cross reference, I can say about Tirukolur Perumal, that is Nikshepavita, known in Tamil as Vaitamanidhi. So, Vaitamanidhi literally translated safe deposit. So God is Vaitamanidhi, our only treasure. When we are guided by the only treasure Vaitamanidhi, we need not bother about these worldly belongings. So they are all very little compared to God, who is always eternal and ever ready to come to protect us. So the Vedanta Desika's contribution to Indian philosophy is, I cannot measure it. It is immeasurable, that is. So Vedanta Desika's texts are very tough for some people, especially to me. I should have had Galakshepa from so many preceptors who were contemporary to me, but I missed the opportunity. Just I have studied once at the feet of Uttamur Viragacharya, Srimad Rahasya Tresara alone. That is only twice a week. But what little I know is because of the grace of Srimad Arya Singers, who have given me Bharanyasam and Samasrena, and Uttamur Swami, who has guided me in the study of Srimad Rahasya Tresara. Actually, about Vedanta Desika, I should have told so many things, but I am not able to provide much thing now. Referring to only his Dasavatara Stotra, I will complete my introduction on Vedanta Desika. Vedanta Desika's Dasavatara Stotra, there goes this 12th shloka. Icha Amina Viharaka Chapa Mahaputrin Yadricha Hare Raksha Bhamana Rosharama Karuna Kakutsta Hela Halin Krida Vallava Kalkava Nadasa Kalkin Niti Pratyaham Jalpantah Purusha Punanti Bhuvanam Punyoga Panyapana. The Raksha Granthas are said to be fences. Fences means it is a protection. So Vedanta Desika made so many rakshas for the sake of saving them from misinterpretations. So on the topic of Nikshepa Saranagati and on the topic of Sri Satcharitra, that is Varnasrama Dharma and Anusthana of Sri Vaishnava, he has given us these two treasures, that is Satcharitra Raksha and Nikshepa Raksha. But they have to be studied and under a very competent preceptor who has followed the Desika Granthas in detail. Then alone one can understand the nuances. However, how Professor Srilata Raman is going to explain to us this Sri Satcharitra Raksha, let us hear her and understand whatever is possible for us to now learn about the text of Sri Vedanta Desika. I am very much thankful to Alumni Association for providing me this unique opportunity to say a few words on Srimad Vedanta Desika, the preceptor for excellence. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir. Thank you very much, sir. Now I request our distinguished speaker from Canada to talk on Sri Desika's Sat Charitra Raksha.
Thank you, Sri Parthasarathi and members of the Alumni Association for inviting me to give this talk. I'm particularly honored that Professor Raghavan is here and very kindly gave this introduction.
Mr. Dayanandi has also joined, madam.
Yes, and also I'm delighted that Professor Dayanidhi, head of the department, is also here. Namaskaram, sir. There are many distinguished scholars here, starting with Professor Raghavan, who know much more than I can ever know in my lifetime about Swami Deshikan's Granthas and the literature of Sri Vaishnavism. And I am both humbled and intimidated by your presence. Whatever I have to say today about the Satcharitra Raksha, I'm sure can be greatly amplified by several of you here and even corrected. So if there is anything that I have omitted or that I have conveyed wrongly, I would deeply appreciate these points to be raised in the discussion, and I welcome any further feedback on this paper, which will only help me to learn more and to better it. So without much ado, let me begin with the lecture. As Professor Raghavan rightly pointed out, one of the main reasons Swami Deshikan remains central and relevant even today, not just for his engagement with the doctrines of Vishishtadvaita Vedanta, but equally importantly, from the perspective of those who belong to the tradition, is because he wrote and commented on so many aspects of the everyday religious life of the community. Here, particular mention can be made of his simple and comprehensive stotra on Sharanagati for daily recitation, the Adaikalapattu, or how he reflected on the right kinds of food appropriate for a Sri Vaishnava diet in his Ahara Niyamam. What Sri K.S. Krishnaswamy Iyengar says in his foreword to the 1978 edition of Deshika Prabandham holds true of a certain kind of work he wrote, which was to make available doctrinal truths and the views of the Acharyas in as simple and accessible a manner as possible to the community as a whole, as well. So even while the Satcharitra Raksha, which I speak of in this talk, is in Sanskrit, and as Professor Raghavan pointed out, these granthas are not simple works. It is not meant to be one of his breathtakingly ambitious and difficult work like the Tattvamukta Kalapa, but rather one which tries to speak about what defines Sri Vaishnava bodily practice and identity. The Satcharitra Raksha, as Professor Raghavan already said, is one of the fivefold protections or defenses, the Raksha Panchakam, which he has already mentioned. I won't go into the detail. The Pancharatra Raksha, Nikshepa Raksha, Rahasya Raksha, and so on. The Satcharitra Raksha is divided into 3 chapters. The first deals with the injunctions regarding to wearing upon one's body the discus and conch of Vishnu, the Sudarshana Panchajanya Dharana Vidhi, followed by 2 further chapters that deal with the injunctions relating to wearing the Urpa Pundra, and finally the usage of the food offerings that have already been made to Vishnu Narayana, which is the Naivedya chapter respectively. In this lecture, due to the constraints of time, I'm going to only talk about chapter 1, which is about wearing the conch and discus on the body. And I'm not referring only to painting them, but specifically I'm trying to talk about the practice of branding, or what we call Tapta Mudra, which is that of branding the arms with the conch and discus, which excited the most controversy over many centuries as a Vaishnava practice. In writing the Satcharitra Raksha, Swami Deshikan consolidated and expanded on the Sri Vaishnava position on what needed to be defended as orthodox practice, even as he showed the strength of the community's religious standing in the 13th, 14th century by no longer speaking of its practices in purely defensive terms, vis-a-vis, let us say, smarta objections. In this respect, Swami Deshikan's situation was already markedly different from that of Yamunacharya a few centuries earlier. Let us recollect that in his great work, the Agama Pramanyam, Yamunacharya was defending the status of Vaishnavas or Bhagavatas, even to be considered Brahmins. But by the time we come to Swami Deshikan, and even beyond his time, the only real problem that Smartas had, not just with the Sri Vaishnavas, but with all Vaishnavas, and I'm coming to this in the later section, including the Dvaitas and others, was that of Tapta Mudra, or branding the conch and discus on one's arms. And it is Swami Deshikan's defense of this practice in the Satcharitra Raksha that I speak of in today's lecture. So in the first section of the talk, I'm going to trace the historical textual development of the practice of Tapta Mudra within the Sri Vaishnava tradition prior to Swami Deshikan's defense. I've been fortunate in having a close colleague of mine, Marion Rastelli, at the University of Vienna, who is an expert on the Pancharatra Agamas and has worked on them for very many years. And she has looked at some of the early materials on Tapta Mudra relating to the Pancharatra Agamas only in a shortly to be published article. We have come through different sources to the same general conclusions, and I will summarize this evidence for you first. In the second section, I will refer to some of the arguments made in the Satcharitra Raksha on why Tapta Mudra is important, and show also how these arguments are augmented by the literature produced either within the same period as Swami Deshikan or within a century or two afterwards. In the final section, I will show that regardless of these defenses of Tapta Mudra by Swami Deshikan, it remained a contested practice, historically seen as both special to and problematic when it came to Vaishnavas, leading to recurring attacks from Smarta writers within the textual history of classical literature. So section 1, the history of Tapta Mudra just prior to the Satcharitra Raksha. The Sri Vaishnava ritual practice of branding oneself with the weapons of Vishnu Narayana, the Tapa Sanskara, is historically accounted for from perhaps the 9th century. So of course, I'm here referring to Periyarva's Tirupallandu verse 7, Tiyil Poligendra Sensurarari Tigal Tiruchakkarathin Koyit Poriyale Ottundru Nindru Kudikudiyat Cheygindrom. As far as I'm aware, this is one of the earliest references to the practice that we have, which is textually authenticated. And the practice is hotly contested throughout the early and later medieval periods, even as it is also clearly vouched for in the tradition's hagiographical literature, by which I mean the Guru Parampara Prabhavams, from perhaps the 13th to 14th century onwards, if we regard at least the earlier portions of the Arairappadi Guru Parampara Prabhavam as stemming from around this period. Regarding its early history, apart from the reference in the Tirupallandu, and I'd be happy to be corrected on this if anybody has further information, we have some scant evidence that the practice may have well been pan-sectarian, that is, it was not restricted to Vaishnavas, and part of a certain kind of popular religion at a certain historical moment. We have references in the Periya Puranam, as well as in the Garuda Purana, to putting the marks of Vishnu on children as part of a protective armor, the Vishnu Kavacha, and also to protect people from the Yamakinkara, the servants of death. We have that mentioned in the Satcharitra Raksha as well, and also in battle to protect from enemies. But the Satcharitra Raksha is our first full-length defense of the practice from within the tradition, as far as I'm aware of. But to what extent, prior to Swami Deshikan, was it authenticated or justified in the Pancharatra Agamas, the ritual source book for at least almost all of temple ritual within the Sri Vaishnava tradition? So is it authenticated in it prior to the 13th century? This question has been addressed and attempted to be answered by Marion Rastelli through a systematic study of the topic of Tapta Mudra in the Pancharatra Agamas, and I'm summarizing her findings here. So she suggests that the first reference is in the Sanat Kumara Samhita, Indraratra 9.7, and there's a single line which is as follows: Chakranka sarvada bhutva chare chakra dhvajopiva. So one should always walk around marked by the discus, chakra ankaha, or carrying a discus banner, chakra dhvaja. The Sanat Kumara Samhita is cited by Yamunacharya in the Agama Pramanyam, but inasmuch as it seems to be a composite work containing sections which Rastelli suggests may have been added a bit later, we cannot definitely say if this reference to being marked by the discus comes from the 10th century or earlier. Further, to be marked by the discus, as my reference to the Vishnu Kavacha shows, does not mean being branded, but perhaps only having it painted on the body. And indeed, we must recollect that such a reference is already there when it comes to speaking of the Siddhas devoted to Vishnu Narayana in Shvetadvipa in the Narayaniya section of the Mahabharata. They are described as those who, and I'll quote, have 4 arms and are marked by the conch, discus, mace, and lotus in their hands. Tatra tejomaya siddha nivasanti chaturbhuja shankha chakra gada padmair ankita shveshu panishu. So we have that reference in the Narayaniya. So far, the earliest reference in the Agamas do not necessarily imply that Vaishnavas had the Tapta Mudra ritual, only that from very early on in the tradition, Bhagavatas or Vaishnavas prominently wore the chakra and the Shankha chakra on their bodies. Secondly, Rastelli shows us that the earliest unambiguous reference to Tapta Mudra is from the Parameshvara Samhita, probably composed in the vicinity of Srirangam, sometime prior to Swami Deshikan, inasmuch as he cites it in the Satcharitra Raksha. In the chapter on the installation of Pratishta of temples and images, the following passage appears. I'm quoting the whole passage now. Likewise, Vishnu Narayana's Brahmins, Kshatriyas, Vaishyas, Maudgalas, etc., and others must by no means be without his marks. Therefore, they are immediately to be marked with the discus, conch, mace, and lotus made of metal, which have been thoroughly heated in fire, perfumed while reciting their particular mantras, and worshipped with arghya, scents, etc. When Brahmins, etc., who are versed in the Vedas, the Trividya, who are perfect in knowledge, and who are firm on good conduct as taught, and also others are marked in this way, they are known to be qualified for the rules of behavior, samaya, and listening to the teachings, meaning the Pancharatra Agamas, etc. This is the quotation from the Parameshvara Samhita. Rastelli points out or suggests that the Parameshvara Samhita was composed by a group of Pancharatrikas called the Ekayanas, who did not undergo any kind of initiation or diksha, but saw themselves as having the qualification, adhikara, to perform Vaishnava rituals by birth. But the Parameshvara Samhita also refers to another set of Brahmins who are called the Trividyas, who seem to have belonged to a Vedic Shaka, who were a different group from the Ekayanas. In the Parameshvara Samhita, these Trividya Brahmins now have to undergo Tapta Mudra to both study the Pancharatra Agamas as well as to have the right to do Pancharatra rituals in the temples. Further, and this is equally important, in the Parameshwara Samhita passages, Tapta Mudra is a single ritual that has to be done. It stands alone and is not linked in any way to the fivefold ritual known as the Panchasanskara, with which it comes to be integrated within the Sri Vaishnava tradition in time. Similarly, when we turn to the Satcharitra Raksha, we find that Swami Deshikan does not in the relevant chapter speak of Tapta Mudra in connection with Panchasanskara, but as a practice. Mariam Rastelli has also concluded that we can speak of a historical development within the Pancharatra Agamas, which happened in two stages. In the first stage, Tapta Mudra is introduced into the Diksha ritual required to study the Pancharatra Agamas, which in earlier Samhitas, like the Jayakya Samhita and so on, do not include it. In a second textual stage, it is part of the Panchasanskaras and becomes indispensable for an orthodox Sri Vaishnava. This historical development I will sum up again later. I don't wish to make an argumentum ex silentio here, that is an argument on the basis of what is not said than what is said, by saying that because in this chapter on Satcharitra Raksha, Tapta Mudra is not directly linked with Panchasanskara, it is not already a part of the ritual when Swami Deshikan wrote. Indeed, around the same period as Satcharitra Raksha, we see the emergence of other Pancharatra Agamas, such as the later Ishvara Samhita, not the one quoted by Sri Yamunacharya, and the Sri Prashna Samhita, as well as ritual compendiums such as the Parashara Vishishta Paramadharma Shastram, which now always speak of Tapta Mudra as part of the Panchasanskara. But in this chapter, Swami Deshikan's main intention is to establish not the importance of the whole of the Panchasanskara, but wearing the discus and conch as Vedic practice. Section 2, Tapta Mudra in the Satcharitra Raksha. In this work, Swami Deshikan is obviously and primarily influenced by Yamunacharya's Agama Pramanyam, in that, like Yamunacharya, he is interested in defending Sri Vaishnava practice against possible orthodox, that is Smarta and Mimamsaka objection. Indeed, let us recollect that at least in Yamunacharya's time, there was a kind of denigration of the Sri Vaishnava status as Bhagavatas and considered priests associated with temple worship, living professionally from the payment of fees and the Nirmalya of Vishnu Narayana. And more than a dozen sutras of the Agama Pramanyam constitute a spirited defense of their religious status. Clearly, this is not the position from which Swami Deshikan starts in the Satcharitra Raksha. In fact, he takes the religious status of the Sri Vaishnavas for granted and indeed argues from the opposite perspective, that it is only through seeing what they do that one can know what proper Brahmins do. But he does proceed like Yamunacharya by taking as his main opponent a Mimamsaka. In the remainder of this section, I will only deal with three of the main points raised by the hypothetical Mimamsaka as delineated in the Purva Paksha, and I will follow this with some of the refutations that Swami Deshikan comes up with in the Siddhanta and conclude this section. So the very first shloka of the Satcharitra Raksha offers salutations to those who wear both the discus and the conch and the Urdhva Pundra, and calls them those who have taken refuge with the Pramanas, the Pramana Sharanan. Indeed, the connection established here is vital. Swami Deshikan is going to show in the rest of the work that the wearing of Vishnu's weapons is validated by the Pramanas, and particularly by the Vedas or Shabda Pramana. So he fires his opening salvo right away. I'm giving the translation. Those who perennially hold wrong attitudes, he says, towards those great weapons of the Lord of the entire universe worn by the good, those fools I will beat up with those very same weapons, transformed by reasoning and polished through being whetted on the whetting stone of the Vedas. This is the first verse. The Satcharitra Raksha lays out about 7 arguments of the Purva Paksha that underscore why one should not wear the weapons of Vishnu. Of these 7, I shall, in view of the time constraints, refer to only 3 of them and show how, in replying to them, Swami Deshikan consolidates the Vedic nature of Tapta Mudra. The first major argument is that the wearing of the weapons is not dharma, because we do not know of any Vedic injunctions with regard to this practice. So, of course, the reference is to Jaiminiya Sutras 1, the Shabara Bhashya, Chodana Lakshano Artho Hi Dharma, Tasya Jnanam Animittam, and so on. So, the Mimamsaka says there is no Vedic injunction with regard to Tapta Mudra. His view may be paraphrased as follows. That which is dharma can only be known by Vedic injunction. And even if one were to argue that substances or dravyas are in their essential nature known through direct sensory perception or pratyaksha, their dharmatva or dharmanas cannot be known by direct sensory perception. Their capacity to confer good or shreyas is known only from the Vedas or from Smriti and Itihasa texts that do not contradict the Shruti, or from statements in the Vedic supplementary hymn, the Kilas. Nor, says the Mimamsaka, does Manu refer to the wearing of weapons. In fact, the Dharmashastras prohibit the wounding, Vranakaranadikam, of either one's own or any other person's body. Indeed, at this point, we can recollect that in the Manava Dharma Shastra, branding is a punishment for the worst of Brahmin sinners or Mahapatakas, including those who kill other Brahmins. And there is enough literature to show this. And such, the punishment of branding in the Manava Dharma Shastra includes not just branding, but the loss entirely of caste. Such men can no longer partake of food with other Brahmins. They cannot recite the Veda. They cannot do the usual ritual activities. So the Mimamsaka says, when this is forbidden so strongly in the Dharmashastric literature, how can you say it is valid? So even if you undergo branding, you must immediately do expiation or prayaschitta. Hence, even if some statements are found in the Itihasa Puranas and the Pancharatra in support of this, they are only referring to some special qualities of the Blessed One, and they are not meant for humans. And these statements should anyway be considered as hyperbolic statements or ativada. How does Swami Deshikan respond to this argument? He says there do in fact exist injunctions with regarding to the wearing of the weapons, as well as the manner of doing so. In his citations, he begins with the Vedas and the Upanishads, thus showing irrefutably that this is a dharma sanctioned by Shruti. The texts cited are from Rig Veda, and a very important source seems to be the Maho Upanishad of the Atharva Veda, and also then you have the Kataka Samhita of the Yajurveda. We have altogether about 8 quotations attributed to Shruti. He further adds that there is not a single Smriti statement that contradicts the Shruti statements. And even if this were the case, he takes the Bhatta Mimamsa view that the two must be seen as offering potential alternatives, with the Vedic statements still retaining the greater authority. But further on in the text, he gives an additional argument, which is that the practice of Tapta Mudra is validated by the Pancharatra Agamas. And these have been given by Narayana himself, and their status is equivalent to that of the Vedas. When it comes to ritual practice, they are equally, if not even more valid as to what Sri Vaishnavas should do. A second argument builds further upon this issue of authoritativeness by taking up the Mimamsaka position on the conduct of good men or apta. The argument begins as a discussion about the nature of special kinds of dharmas and not the general ones. The wearing of the weapons of Vishnu Narayana, the Satcharitra Raksha tells us, refines the body. It is a samskara for both the body and the soul, the embodied. And let us recollect now, of course, the definition of sanskara, which Sri Ramanujacharya also gives in the Sri Bhashya in the very beginning. Sanskaro nama karyantara yogyata karana. That is, a sanskara is something that makes the person fit for some other activity. Without undergoing the samskara, the person is not qualified for some other activity. Now, the kind of desha, jati, and kula dharma into which Tapta Mudra would fall, the Mimamsaka replies, it must be in agreement with the Vedas, which it is not. Swami Deshikan responds that the Sattvikas who occupy the lands where Vishnu is worshipped do not have any doubts about this practice. The only people who have doubts are those such as the Balikas mentioned in the Mahabharata, who live outside these lands. So he says, are we to consider wearing the Shankachakra irrelevant only because somebody speaking in a Prakrit dialect is telling us that that is the case? He says we must instead follow what is being said, what is being done by the Sattvikas in the lands where Vishnu is worshipped. Both the Mimamsakas, as Kumarila in his exegesis on Tantravartika shows, and the Vishishtadvaitin have to grapple with the issue of to what extent the words of good men, the aptas, may be considered authoritative in the light of very differing notions of conduct that they can endorse based upon Desha Achara and Kula Achara. Kumarila solves this problem by essentially restricting the set of good men to those who live in the Aryavarta and who practice the rituals prescribed by the Vedas. This can and must be the sole criterion for establishing good conduct. And of course, as far as Kumarila is concerned, Aryavarta remains restricted to the northwest part of India, the land of the Sapta Sindhu, and that is where the Vedas, the people who know the Vedas live. But Swami Deshikan extends the territory of Aryavarta to the lands where Vishnu is worshipped, as well as the Aryas to all the good people who worship him. The good people are those who follow the Pancharatra scriptures and live in the land where Vishnu is worshipped. This is the Aryavarta. So what he's basically doing is taking a Mimamsa view of Aryavarta and expanding it to subvert what they consider is correct. When we come to the third major argument of the Mimamsaka, it is about Shesha Sheshi. And the Mimamsaka basically says that if the argument is that the Sri Vaishnava wears the Shankachakra in imitation of Vishnu Narayana who wears them himself, in real life, we don't see servants wearing what the masters wear. This is not a general principle. In addressing that whole point, finally, Swami Deshikan comes to the central core of his argument, which is the Vedic importance, particularly of the Sudarshana Chakra. First, he quotes the chapter on consecration on Pratishta Adhyaya of the Parameshvara Samhita, in order to establish that the consecration of the discus is done through the recitation of Vedic mantras, such as the Purusha Sukta. This, he says, is a clear indication that the Sudarshana is not simply a weapon, but actually a portion, an amsha of Vasudeva himself, like Sankarshana. The discus is ensouled by Vasudeva, as in the Ahirbudnya Samhita's explanation, and he quotes the Ahirbudnya Samhita on this. There is a long discussion on the status of the Sudarshana Chakra that points to a sort of inconclusive debate on how to categorize the hierarchy of divine and semi-divine beings who form part of the retinue of Vishnu Narayana. Is the Sudarshana Chakra a portion or amsha, or is he on the same level as the Vyuhas? Deshika is not really resolving this question, but an important textual authority that validates the wearing of the Sudarshana appears to be the Maho Upanishad, which I had referred to earlier, assigned to the Atharva Veda. In conclusion, wearing the discus and conch is actually the divinization and depositing of Vishnu Narayana on oneself. It is an obligatory rite, Nitya Karma, that undergirds the Pancharatra ritual life, as much as the wearing of the Yagnopavita, the sacred thread, undergirds doing Smarta rituals. From this pivotal understanding of the practice, it is a self-evident doctrinal step for Swami Deshikan to integrate this practice within the Sri Vaishnava soteriological path, making it an accessory or anga to upasana and hence to moksha. In the final analysis, Tapta Mudra is validated as an obligatory act on the one hand and an obligatory accessory to dhyana or upasana on the other, thus bringing it into firm connection with samashrayana, sharanagati, etc. If we look at the argument of the Satcharitra Raksha carefully, and I've only given you some of the basic features, broad features of some of the important arguments, we see that an important piece of the argument in the doctrinal defense of Tapta Mudra appears to be the worship of the Sudarshana Chakra. This is not insignificant, inasmuch as a Pancharatra work of great importance for Swami Deshikan's lineage, that is, I mean by the lineage both for Nadadu Rammal in the Prapanna Parijatam, as well as for Swami Deshikan himself in his discussion of Prapatti, is the Ahirbudnya Samhita, which speaks of Sudarshana worship and which is also cited by him in the Satcharitra Raksha. In any case, it appears that a connection is established between certain Vedic mantras and the worship of the Sudarshana Chakra that enables Swami Deshikan to argue convincingly for the Vedic nature of Tapta Mudra. It is therefore an interesting line of further research that perhaps still needs to be done, but some of the learned scholars here may clarify that for me, as to how and when the earliest textual materials emerged within the tradition on the worship of the Sudarshana Chakra. And I'm thinking of any other sources apart from the Ahirbudnya Samhita. Now I come to section 3, Tapta Mudra in the mature literature of the Sri Vaishnava tradition. Here I briefly summarize some doctrinal and hagiographical developments related to Tapta Mudra that I've discussed in some of my earlier other articles. Doctrinally, by the time we come to a ritual compendium, like the Parashara Vishishta Paradharma Shastram, possibly later than Swami Deshikan's time, we have a clear theological justification, which has already come up in Satcharitra Raksha, that Samashrayana is an initiatory ritual for both men and women within the tradition. It tells us, gives us a great detailed account of the Panchasanskara, of which Tapa Sanskara is the first one. Without the Panchasanskara, it tells us one is not a Vaishnava and cannot be instructed in the mantras necessary for salvation. a twice-born male or dvija cannot be considered a fully ritually equipped person without samashrayana, because it complements or is equal to the sacred thread ceremony. And so it also has to be done for women at the time of marriage. Thus, it qualifies both men and women for all Sri Vaishnava ritual activity, eventually. When we turn to the Guru Parampara texts, they take the use of Panchasanskara even a step further, or rather they highlight an aspect of it not dealt with either in the Pancharatra Agamas or in Satcharitra Raksha. They show that it can also be considered a kind of conversion ritual, enable those who are not yet members of the community to join the community. In the Arayirappadi Guru Parampara Prabhavam, we have 4 interesting episodes that illustrate this. The first is the marriage of Thirumangai Alvaz to Kumudavalli. She refuses to marry him unless he undergoes the Panchasanskara. He, of course, does this eventually, and she marries him. 2 further episodes relate the conversion of Yadava Prakasha and Yagnamurti. Both were ascetics in the Ekadandi tradition when they came into contact with Ramanujacharya, and they decide to stop being Advaitic ascetics and become Vaishnava Tridandis. Yadava Prakasha is persuaded by his mother to abandon his Advaitic tradition and convert to Sri Vaishnavism. Yagnamurti has a debating duel with Sri Ramanuja. The condition of his defeat is that he becomes a Sri Vaishnava. The case of Yadava Prakasha is particularly interesting because the historical Yadava Prakasha compiled a Yati Dharma Samuchaya, a manual of rules for ascetics, which enumerates the difference between ascetics of the different traditions, the Tridandi versus the Ekadandi. In both the cases of Yadava Prakasha and Yagnamurti, the ritual sequence followed is the same. The Ekadandi ascetic who converts to become a Tridandi first performs expiations or prayashchittas. Then, after he undergoes the first phase there is the first phase, which is the restoration of his top knot and the sacred thread. With these restored, he is then given the emblems of his new allegiance, which are the Tridandi staff and the ochre robes or the kashaya by his acharya. And the final stage of this is Panchasanskara, which concludes with a new Vaishnavite name being given to him. In the Arayirappadi, the final such episode involves the conversion of Ramanuja's cousin Govinda Bhattar, who was a Shaivite and became a Vaishnavite due to the Panchasanskara ceremony performed for him by Periya Thirumalai Nambi, according to the text. Let me further add that we must not think that the dispute about the external markers of religious identity were restricted to Sri Vaishnavas or even all Vaishnavas alone. The issue of the wearing of the sacred ash or the vibhuti on several parts of the body externally and the Rudraksha Mala on the part of Shaivas was also a practice that they felt a need to defend. Thus, for example, we have a work called The Establishment of the Sacred Ash and the Rudraksha, Vibhuti Rudraksha Nirupanam, by one Tyagaraja Dikshitar from the lineage of the great Appaya Dikshitar, possibly composed around the 17th, 18th centuries. I have the text and I've just been reading it, but I have not done a full analysis of it. In this work, Tyagaraja Dikshitar begins by saying the following. Shruti Smritigalalum, Sattukkalin Acharangalalum, Basma Dharanamaanadu Nishchaikapattirukkirathu. Adil Avanambikkai undu pannugira Durjana Vachanangalai Kandikkiren. So he starts like this. That is, it has been established by Shruti texts and Smriti that Basma Dharanam is Vedic. So he is following a very similar interpretive position which Swami Deshikan establishes in the Satcharitra Raksha. I cite this only in order to show that these are issues which are of central importance, not just to Sri Vaishnavas, not just to Vaishnavas, but also to on the Shaiva side. I come to the final section of my talk, which is I just titled Hostility, and you will know why. We might think that after Swami Deshikan's excellent defense of Tapta Mudra, as well as its legitimacy, both in ritual texts and in the later Pancharatra Agamas, that the matter was laid to rest, and the legitimacy of the practice taken for granted, both among Vaishnavas as well as non-Vaishnavas. But history shows that this was far from the case. We have ample historical evidence that Tapta Mudra remained controversial long after the Satcharitra Raksha, particularly when it came to Smarta and Advaitic reaction to it. Two examples illustrate this. The first I take from the work of a current graduate student of mine, Jonathan Peterson, who has worked on the debates between the Madhva Sampradaya and the Advaita Sampradaya in the 15th to 16th centuries. He has shown that Tapta Mudra is not found in the early Madhva literature in the writings of Vyasatirtha, but he shows us that Madhva scholars began to write entire treatises on Tapta Mudra from around the 16th century. The very first work of this kind was Vijayendra's Chakramimamsa, and the model for it was the Satcharitra Raksha. The other great Dvaita scholar, Vadiraja, also deals with the practice in the last chapter of his work, the Yukti Mallika, and in an essay in praise of the Chakram called the Chakrastuti. The Madhvas also apparently have a number of songs in Kannada attributed to Vadiraja that praise the Tapta Mudra ritual. Finally, and unsurprisingly, Tapta Mudra also functioned as a conversion ritual within the Madhva Sampradaya. Thus, Peterson quotes an episode from a popular hagiography of Vadiraja, where Shaiva Brahmins living in coastal Karnataka approach Vadiraja, who purifies them through Vaishnava Diksha, and then gives them the Tapta Mudra before admitting them into the Madhva community. This Madhva emphasis on Tapta Mudra, which seems to have peaked around the 16th century, it did not go unnoticed in Advaitic circles. Thus, Bhattoji Dikshita of Banaras, an acclaimed Advaitin with the mastery of Vyakarana, Mimamsa, Nyaya, and Vedanta, in his work, the Tattva Kaustubha, attacks the very basis of Tapta Mudra. And he's arguing against the Dvaitas mainly, but also includes the Sri Vaishnavas. He says it's not based on any Vedic authority, it's wrong, and he basically takes up the same Mimamsa position. He denies and denigrates the authority of the Pancharatra Agamas on which it is based. He rejects comprehensively that the practice is Vedic. And finally, he condemns it as something which is only done by lowly people who have no relationship with proper orthodoxy or the Vedas. So this was in the 16th century. The second example I come to is from as late as 18th century Jaipur, the subject of a wonderful monograph by Monica Hossmann. It details a controversy which broke out in the court of the king of the Kachwaha dynasty, Savai Jai Singh, whose dates are 1700 to 1743, of the royal house of Amber, and who was the founder of the city of Jaipur. Jai Singh was deeply interested in reviving Vedic ritual in his kingdom, and in general returning to Vedic orthodoxy and Dharmashastric legitimacy. The religious leaders in his court included both Gaudiya Vaishnava Brahmins as well as Smarta Brahmins. At the king's behest, one of the Smarta Brahmins, Hare Krishna Mishra, authored a ritual handbook, the Vaidika Vaishnava Sadachara, the right conduct for a Vedic Vaishnava, which attacked two aspects of Vaishnava behavior. One is the Vaishnava Ekadashi, which is a different date from the Smarta Ekadashi, as well as Tapta Mudra. On the basis of this book written by Hare Krishna Mishra, Jai Singh demanded that the Gaudiya Vaishnavas in his court abandoned both these practices. They refused to do so, and they fled his kingdom as a result. Thus, we see that Tapta Mudra as a mark of group identity had the sort of real life repercussions well into recent times for Vaishnavas, which resulted in the loss of royal patronage and hardship. In this concluding paragraph, I would like to address the larger question that concerns those of us who are historians of Sri Vaishnavism and of religions in general. Some of you in my audience, not obviously Professor Raghavan and others, but some other of you may well ask, why should we study the texts like this at all on Tapta Mudra or Swami Deshikan's texts? And why should it be of general interest to us to study these texts? There is, I would suggest, a more narrow answer and a broader answer to this question. I think it is worthwhile studying Swami Deshikan's texts because they are some of the most brilliant works of a brilliant mind that we are going to find within the Indian religious tradition. This is evident once one immerses oneself in them and sees his great and capacious intellect trying to bring together and reconcile the enormous diversity of the Vishishtadvaita Vedantic tradition and trying to create a system that accommodates all aspects of it. And this is something extraordinary if we think about it. At the same time, for those of us who are looking at the tradition as a historical development, it helps us to see that it was adapted and evolved over time. It was not static. This applies not only to the textual corpus, but also to the practices and rituals. From such a historical perspective, it appears not implausible that Tapta Mudra may have emerged in popular, not strictly Sri Vaishnava practice alone, as a form of protective ritual to ward off various kinds of dangers. It may also have been primarily about painting the body with the emblems of Vishnu Narayana, but over time it comes to be incorporated into a form of obligatory initiation for those who wish to perform rituals within Vaishnava temples. And it is in this form that it comes to be included in Diksha rituals in the early Pancharatra Agamas. A strong link with the worship of the Sudarshana Chakra can also be identified. And finally, it acquires profound doctrinal importance as part of Panchasanskara and comes to be considered the equivalent of Upanayana for both men and women, and as well as a conversion ritual into the community. Understanding the historical stages of the evolution of the practice enables us also to see how external markers of religious identity were seen and continue to be seen as crucial for the Sri Vaishnava community to hold together and to form a cohesive religious unit. Thus, the acharyas over the centuries continued to staunchly defend the practice and the necessity for it in the face of much hostility, as did other Vaishnava communities which also adhered to it. This brings me to the larger point with which I conclude the talk, which is, why do we need to know all this? Clearly, marking the body externally for religious purposes cannot be regarded merely as some kind of external superficial change or one which is of lesser significance. Rather, many religious cultures, not just the Sri Vaishnavas, throughout the world, see such marking as effecting a deep transformative change on the person wearing the markings, which is equivalent to a biological change. Indeed, doctrinally at least, the implication is that without such a marking, the body is not a properly religious body or qualified to lead the right kind of religious life. At the same time, the texts show us that it is this very marking of the body explicitly that invites religious discrimination and hostility. We need not only look at what happened in Jaipur in the 18th century. Examples abound even today from contemporary religious life. The excitement and constant debate about what people are wearing, say Muslim women wearing the hijab. I read in the newspaper in Toronto recently about a young Jewish man who was turned away from a hotel in Germany because he was wearing a yellow Star of David on his coat. These are some of the examples we encounter every day. These incidents show us that there is a general fear and dislike of those who look different that all of us have, that emerges in all cultures from time to time. A study of these issues, therefore, from within the Sri Vaishnava tradition's long history, might therefore also enable us to understand better and introspect about how the marking of the body becomes conducive to hostility and rejection, a hostility inflicted by those who do not mark their bodies on those who do, or alternatively by those who do mark their bodies towards those who don't. And I think these larger issues may also make it worthwhile to read a text like the Satcharitra Raksha. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam, for your wonderful lecture. Now I request Dr. Dayanidhi to say a few words. Dr. Dayanidhi, please.
It is audible, sir.
Yes, very much.
Yes.
Padmapate stutipade na vipachyamanam pashyantvihya prapadana pranava mahantaha matvakya sambalitamapyajahat svabhavam manyam yetishvara mahanasa sampradayam வாழியருளாளர் வாழியணியத்திகிரி வாழியதிராசன் வாசகத்தோர் வாழி சரணாகதி என்னும் சார்வுடன் மற்றொன்னை அரணாகக் கொள்ளாதார் அன்பு. I first of all thank to Alumni Association and Secretary TKP Dr. TK Parsarathi for giving me the opportunity in this elite forum. And I first of all thank to Srilata Madam for choosing this topic. It is one of the unknown hidden topic in the academic field, because Swami Deshikan's works, mainly the people who concentrate only on the stotras as well as Nataka and Kavyas. But further, some of the texts called Taktamukta Kalapa, Adhikarana Saravali, those who are well versed in the Sibhashya, they will have the opportunity to know about the text. But this Raksha Grantha is totally hidden, unknown text, familiarly in for the Vaishnavas people also, because these Satcharitra Raksha text deals about the importance of the Tattvamukta Chakradharana Samashrayanam. I thank to Professor Srilata Madam, who has given a wonderful talk on Satcharitra Raksha, how the text has been described by the Swami Vedanta Deshika, and analytical study. Very important thing for Vaishnava, in the Dharma Shastra, we call thrice born. All the Brahmins, all the those who are born in thrice lineage, after you want to be a Vaishnava, we called as this the Samashrena as a Vaishnavi Karanam. In our Sampradaya, we called as a Vaishnavi Karanam. In the performance of the Samashrena Homa, there is one part called as Vaishnavi Karanam. With the Purusha Sukta, they do the Ahutis. In this Satcharitra Raksha, Swami Vedanta Desika has beautifully described the importance and pramana, how the Veda himself has given the pramana of doing the Samashrena. The mantra Charanam Pavitram Vidatam Puranam, the mantra Swami Vedanta Desika has quoted in the Satcharita Raksha and explained the Charanam Pavitram, the Pavitra Shabda has given a detailed explanation in the text in Satcharita Raksha about doing the Samashrena of Sudarshana Lanchanam. How the Purva Pakshis are defending there is no pramana on doing this Samashrena, but the Veda, because in Vedic mantra there is Anatta Tanun. We should not do anything in the Sharira with Agni Samskara. The doing Samashrena like that has been banned, has been said in mantra. But in the Veda mantra itself, as explained by Vedanta Desika in Satcharita Raksha, unique way about the importance of Charanam Pavitram Vidatam Puranam, the mantra define the importance of the Samashrenam.
Yes.
I thank Madam has given a wonderful and detailed explanation about the context of Satcharita Raksha first chapter, the Tapat Samskara. I thank for giving a wonderful lecture on the unknown subject, because I first repeatedly saying that because of the unknown. Why I am saying unknown means the scholars of Vaishnava who are studying or Vaishnava practicing Vaishnava doesn't know about these texts like Satcharita Raksha, Nikshepa Raksha, Rahasya Raksha. They call they think that Rahasya Raksha means there's something about Tirumantra and Dvaya, and Pancharatra Raksha means dealing about some Pancharatra Agamas. But Swami Vedanta Desika has given a wonderful explanation about the importance of Pancharatra Raksha and the importance of the Satcharita Raksha about the Samashrena and Tapa Samskara, and what are all the foods offered to the deity has been beautifully explained. And then I thank Madam has given a wonderful talk on the Satcharita Raksha. Is a very useful for those who are doing research, want to do research, may have this like topic to study the analytical study. So I am thankful for the Alumni Association has given me the opportunity, and wonderful thanks.
Thank you, Professor Dayanand.
Thank you, Dayanand Swami. Thank you. Now I request Srinivas Raghavan to say a few words as vote of thanks.
Adiyan Srinivasa Raghavan Dasan, humble pranams to all. On behalf of the Department of Vaishnavism Alumni Association, University of Madras, at the outset I hereby express my hearty thanks to Dr. Professor Srimati Latha Madam for giving this nice enlightening lecture on Swami Vedanta Desika's Satcharitra Raksha. Secondly, I thank our Professor Dr. Raghavan Swami, former HOD, Department of Vaishnavism, University of Madras, for his dedicated inaugural address on this fitting occasion, especially when he quotes Nasti Pitrardinam Kinjindamaya Kinjidardidam Astime Asti Sailagre Vastu Paidamaham Dhanam Vaitamanidhi, to appreciate that Srivan Narayana is the ultimate goal, is the very purpose of Sri Vaishnava philosophy. Next, I thank our Professor Dr. T.K. Parsardi for his fine efforts to arrange this spiritual lecture. Of course, also I express my thanks to our HOD, Dr. Dayanand Swami, who always enthusiastically join these meetings with dedication and offer his expert comments. I also thank Professors Dr. Kalyan Swami and Dr. Jagannivas Swami for having adorned the meeting with their gracious presence. Last but not the least, all our Sri Vaishnava members and non-members who with all interest participated and listened to this lecture, but for whom the purpose of this meeting will not be achieved. Once again, I thank one and all. Thank you.
So thank you, Nandal. If you have any, if you have, yes, if you have any doubt on the subject, you can have a simple one or two, this one question answer session we have with the Srilata madam. Anybody wants to raise any question, you can always get it clarified. I think are you having enough time, madam, to discuss for another maximum 10 minutes?
Yes, yes, I'm fine. But I have a question for Professor Raghavan.
Yes.
And Professor Raghavan, நீங்க வந்து you spoke of the publication of the Rahasya Raksha. I'm very interested in finding out when we are going to see something of this publication. Obviously, I would love to see a copy of it. உங்களுக்கு தெரியுமா any chance that when it will be brought out? Did you say that Uttamur Swami's there's a urai on this?
One, ma'am.
Raghavan sir, I think he's
Maybe
not
he's
there.
left. Okay, that's all right. I'll write to him directly.
Sure, I will also I will ask him.
Please. Thank you.
No problem.
Okay.
Raghavan, yes, come. Raghavan sir,
Adiyan.
yeah, madam is asking a question. When that book will be ready on Rahasya Raksha?
அது இப்ப ரீபிரிண்ட் பண்ணவே இல்லையே, கிடைக்கவே இல்லை.
அதான் சார் உங்களை கேக்குறேன், எப்போ வரப்போறது, யாரு ரீப்ரிண்ட் போட போறா? ஏன்னா அது ஒரு காப்பி கிடைக்கிறது ரொம்ப I would be love to see it. இங்க எப்போ வரப்போறதா?
தெரியல, இப்போ ஒண்ணும் அதை பத்தி ஒரு விஷயமே தெரியல.
சரி சார், நீங்க தான் ஏதாவது அதுக்கு வழி பண்ணணும். பின்ன பாருங்க சார், முக்கியமான விஷயம்.
மினிமம் சதுஸ்லோகி பாஷ்யம் மட்டுமாவது ரீபிரிண்ட் பண்ணா நல்லா இருக்கும். டேக்கப் பண்ண போறா தெரியாது. சதுஸ்லோகி பாஷ்யம்னா முதல் 4 ஸ்லோகத்து காமெண்ட்ரி மட்டும் போரும் கூட. அது முதல்ல நமக்கு இன்ட்ரோடக்ஷனா இருக்கும்.
கரெக்ட். எனிவே நான் அடுத்த வாட்டி வரும்போது உங்களோட அதை பத்தி பேசலாம்னு இருக்கேன். வரும்போது பார்க்கலாம் சார்.
சரி.
தேங்க்யூ.
So thank you, madam. I think that's all now for now. Thank you very much for having graced the occasion. Thank you.
Thank